Live. There we go. We are successfully live. I apologize right out of the gate. I'm not too sure what was going on there. I've had my OBS ready to start streaming and streaming for the last 2 minutes now. I'm not too sure why my YouTube just now picked it up, so I apologize for that very brief delay for the first minute we were scheduled to stream. But good morning, ladies and gentlemen. Happy Monday, September 9th, 2024. This is News 6 meteorologist David Nazario back with a somewhat breaking tropical update. So if you guys tuned in for my previous live stream, I'll openly say right from the jump start, my preliminary prediction was potentially a mid-grade tropical storm based on the synoptic pattern that was in place over the western Gulf of Mexico, the southern United States, the southeast, and the rest of the Caribbean, the rest of the Gulf, and out into the western Atlantic. Upon further investigation, and thankfully, which is why we're doing it this morning as opposed to yesterday evening, I wanted to get that reconnaissance data from our hurricane hunters into not only the hurricane models but our global models to see exactly what they thought of the big picture weather pattern. And to summarize, essentially what is expected to play out with future Francine is what we were thinking could help benefit Ernesto on its way up towards the island of Bermuda. The ventilation and the extra diffluence brought on by the divergent quadrant, or the leading edge of a long wave trough that was moving off the east coast in Ernesto's case. In this case, we have that deep trough that is situated over the central and eastern halves of the United States that's also helping to bring down additional jet level energy at 300 and 200 millibars. If you guys follow me on Instagram, I'd kind of given you a bit of a small glimpse of where my thinking is, and a number of other meteorological sources are also thinking. And the game of tropical chess, as I like to call it, this system is unfortunately winning for our folks out there in Texas and Louisiana. It definitely looks like, because of the large-scale dynamics that will actually be playing in favor of future Francine, will unfortunately lead to a somewhat greater level of impacts and a higher ceiling. And I'm going to talk you through that here in a moment. Thank you very much for tuning in, guys. If I can get you to nudge that like button. I've noticed the algorithm for this channel has already dropped us because I've been a lot more latent in my activity and on my live streaming on here. So let's get this information out there. I want to break it down to the best of my ability after digesting a lot of this stuff until about almost midnight yesterday evening, trying to get everything put together for a briefing this morning amidst everything else that I have going on. This is kind of like a crunch time week for me. Tonight, Jonathan Kagas and I will definitely be going live as well at around 8 to 9 o'clock Eastern Daylight Time for a Tropics Watch over on the Just Weather channel. So you guys are going to get a 2-for-1 deal today from both of us. I'm going to start the day off with a quick formal live stream with you all here in the Weather Center. And then later on this evening, if you're subscribed to the Just Weather channel, Jonathan and I from News 6 are going to be going live to talk about all the data that comes in at 12 and 18 Zulu. So here's the National Hurricane Center homepage. This is PTC number 6. Personally, I'm still not a fan of PTC. I just think that sounds silly, but for the politics surrounding it, it allows the National Hurricane Center to begin to issue watches, warnings, and advisories, so I'm fully on board with that. A fairly impressive feature, as a matter of fact, as well, and I was telling someone on Instagram, it was, let's see, AR Nazarian. I was mentioning to him on Instagram that this is probably one of the more impressive systems that we've had for much of the hurricane season, especially as a potential tropical cyclone. If you remember, Ernesto started out fairly dry. Debbie started out as a dry wave, very elongated, weird popcorn convection until finally getting into the Gulf of Mexico. This feature has most definitely taken advantage of the overnight diurnal maximum. It has definitely optimized its environment, and it is taking full advantage. And truthfully, that's why I even am raising my ceiling with this to something along the lines of a Cat 1, Cat 2 on its final approach. Can this become a major hurricane? It really depends on if we try to continue to maximize where it is situated right now. We are right in almost the center of the Bay of Campeche. You can see right here, which means not only are we taking advantage of the atmospheric dynamics, but we're taking advantage of the geography of that area. We have cyclonic flow around the storm, and if you look, we're sitting in a bowl, we're sitting in a notch. So naturally, the terrain features around the center are going to help physically physically, when I say physically, I mean physics, physically help to push this thing together, mash it together, kind of like a clay sculpture. Instead of it being very broad and elongated, we're going to see it crammed together on either side. And if you look at the satellite this morning, you'll see phenomenal structure, to tell you the truth. The thunderstorms definitely capitalized on the overnight diurnal max. And then we can't forget about our other invest out there, AL92, a 60-60 shot, 60% chance of formation over the next 48 hours, 60% chance over the next 7 days. This feature has been very wishy-washy on all of our models, just like every other feature out there in the Atlantic. We saw a lot of its convection dissipate, but the National Hurricane Center still does think this could lift up out of that monsoon trough configuration and try to develop, at least even for a brief stint before the feature upstream of it tries to get going. I do believe this could be our next invest, AL93. We're at an 0 for 60 split here, 0% chance, no chance of development over the next 2 days, next 7 days, 60% chance. This one is very interesting because the GFS and the Euro actually have started to favor this feature. The Canadian and the Icon still want to develop both of these features. Let's put it that way. The GFS, of course, being GFS, 0 and 12Z will keep our upstream feature, 92, rocking and rolling off towards the west-northwest. Then for some strange reason, 6 and 18Z, the continuity runs, will lose it. But all of our models seem to favor this upstream entity that I do think will gain the designation AL93 as we go over the rest of the week, maybe by Wednesday, if not the very latest Friday, as a low-level, mid-level circulation starts to very broadly show itself. I see a lot of comments in the chat, questions. I promise, rock with me. We're going to get through the meat and potatoes of the information, and I will answer your questions, guaranteed. As a matter of fact, this is going to answer one of the questions. So here is the latest track. This is our 7 a.m. Central Daylight Time track. This will update in about less than an hour. I'm not too sure if we'll be live to talk track in about an hour. I have a lot going on this morning before I have to roll into the studio, so we'll definitely be covering that tonight on our Tropics Watch with Jonathan Kagas over at News 6. But this is where we stand currently. Right now, our models are in a very good agreement that central Louisiana between Beaumont and Baton Rouge is going to be our landfall site. We're going to have to watch the hurricane models, though, because the hurricane models are starting to give this thing an unfortunate nudge towards the east, putting New Orleans, Lake Pontchartrain, and the other outer-lying water features on the immediate southeast portions of Louisiana more under the gun for more harsh impacts. And already I've been talking to my buddy Mike, a wonderful moderator here in the chat. Mike is situated out there in New Orleans. Him and I have been talking back and forth, and I'm already concerned with the fact that we're going to have an intensifying feature moving in like this. If you take into equation the rotation of the winds on the outside of this feature, we're already going to be poised to see some potential coastal and inland flooding of not only the lakes, the rivers, the inlets, but even as far into as Lake Pontchartrain and the immediate coastal areas of that large body of water on the east side of Louisiana, the boot of Louisiana. On top of that, if this thing stays on its current course and it does not deviate from the forecasted track we have here, our tornadic activity is likely going to go up for Louisiana and especially Mississippi being on the dirty side of this feature. And unfortunately, once again, that jet stream, the subtropical jet as well as the polar front jet that's coming down, is also going to help enhance whatever spin that these isolated thunderstorms may have within the vortex, especially on that right front 90-degree quadrant that you take if you take a 90-degree slice of the storm as it moves up like so, that's going to be your tornadic quadrant, particularly with the storm surge also rocking in there as well. Now, I saw someone ask in the chat in terms of Florida. No, I don't think this is coming to Florida. I do not think this is coming from Florida. And in fact, I can confidently say even the panhandle as far west as Pensacola is likely out of the running here just because we have what we would consider the Florida shield in place. I have that pulled up as well, brought to us by the Euro and the GFS, and I'll walk you through that as well. I really do think Louisiana and Mississippi are going to see the harshest impacts of whatever this storm decides to bottom out as on approach to the coastline. Here's a quick look at the interactive track so we can take a look at the actual graphical wind field here. It's a very west side loaded system. We're not very symmetrical, and the reason it is very west side loaded is once I show you the satellite image, we have a lot of our most gracious thunderstorm activity firing on the south and west flanks of this feature. So naturally, because of the turbulent mixing and the rising velocities we have in that intense thunderstorm, those hot towers, the convective complexes, that's why our winds and begins to consolidate. Naturally, we're going to develop more of that symmetry. And I also wanted to pull this up because if you look at this interactive track right here in about less than 12 hours, they are thinking this will be Tropical Storm Francine. Mike and I are thinking as early as 11 o'clock here in about 50 minutes, we're already going to have a tropical storm. When I show you the satellite, I can buy into that. I do think we could see a tropical storm at 11, if not at the very latest 2 p.m. I see no reason why this feature is not going to optimize further. We are going into a diurnal minimum, so we'll have to see if this convection can hold on. Yesterday it did a fair job for itself. We also had that vorticity couplet, that other spin, merge with it from the north and increase its speed shear, which probably also kept our west side loaded thunderstorms going off the way that they did, and as consecutively they did. So we'll have to see now that these areas have merged and we're starting to come together and form a singular mid-level cyclone, not too readily apparent on the surface. We're getting there. It's still fairly broad and large, like a donut. We're not seeing that very tight vortex wrapping up just yet, so we haven't reached the point to where this thing is going to start to potentially rapid intensify, but we are getting there. We're seeing signs that this feature does want to be taken seriously, and it has my attention. Let's put it that way. Here's a look at the water vapor shot. So as you can see, solid system for sure. It's got, as everyone would say on the X and on other social media platforms, it's got, quote, the look. This looks a lot better than Ernesto and Debbie did. The only system that could give this feature a run for its money was Beryl when it was in its preliminary development stages. And I'm not talking in terms of Cat 4, Cat 5. I mean as it started coming out of the MDR, it had that natural convection with it, that symmetry already with it, whereas as we all know, Chris, Alberto, Debbie, Ernesto, before they got started, they had it rough. They had a very rough up and coming, and then they kind of got their act together towards the back end of their life cycle, especially Ernesto. We saw a stronger, more organized Ernesto up in the North Atlantic as it was on approach to the eastern Canadian provinces. This here is definitely taking full advantage of its environment. We still have our jet coming down across the north and South Dakota area, the front range of the Rockies, and then dipping back down over the southeast and the mid-Atlantic. This is our subtropical jet. And the reason I highlight these features, number one, we will still have to battle some shear as this lifts towards the north. We're still going to have shear in place. However, I do think the return flow that we're seeing around Baja, California, and Mexico is also what's helping to pump in some additional moisture to protect this feature from dry air. And when we get to some of the model data and the graphics I have pulled up, I'll show you why it is that this jet on both sides, this convergent flow and then eventually divergent flow just out ahead of it right there is actually what's going to help this system develop a little bit more. Ernesto was just not in a quality setup to exploit the pattern that we have in place here because of that anticyclonic spin that we just have over the Gulf of Mexico, the Yucatan, Mexico, and the Western Caribbean. That's what's helping to keep this thing very much so alive. Look at how awesome these thunderstorms look. And please don't wordplay that as well. I'm not saying this looks awesome because it's strengthening. I'm saying in terms of organization, this system is really trying to do its thing. I'm personally, especially since I have friends out there in New Orleans, I'm not excited about this whatsoever. And like I said, I immediately wanted to backpedal on my original ceiling because this thing is definitely going to give us a run for its money. Here's a closer look. We're looking more so at the storm's external structuring as well as the dry air to the north. So this dry air is still going to try to increase the impediments on this system, try to slow it down some. And okay, good. You guys can still see. Let me move my head over to the right-hand side so you can get a full image of there. The problem that I'm worried about and why I do think that this is going to become a hurricane, maybe even potentially sooner than what National Hurricane Center is thinking. The hurricane models are kind of upping that tempo as well, is we are right underneath the divergent quadrant of not only the anticyclone that's parked here and rotating around clockwise, but we also have our digging jet just upstream to the north that's increasing our diffluence aloft. The difference between divergence, V, is usually in the vertical platform or the vertical perspective. So when I say divergence, I mean rising, like rising up into the air. When I say diffluence, that's horizontally. Think of it like a breaststroke in swimming. That's diffluence. When you're divergent, you're coming up out of the water. When you're diffluent, it's at a single level of the atmosphere, and you're kind of breaststroking to go forward at the surface of the water, if that makes sense to you guys. So if you look, we're on the west side of our anticyclone and getting right underneath the diffluent quadrant of our trough to the north over the Gulf Coast states. And you can already see we have outflow channels opening up with this system on the north side and the south side. That's another kicker here. So we have strong jet activity to the north that will help to instigate a bit more amplitude out of our anticyclone, and being in the divergent quadrant of our anticyclone as the outflow develops on this system, that divergent flow in the center of the storm coming up, and then it difflues, or however you want to call it, it spreads out at the highest part of the atmosphere. That's also going to help this system out a little bit. Like I said, we were not in this type of a setup with Ernesto. Ernesto just had the trough and the frontal boundary to its north and west. And that's why Ernesto sucked in a lot of that dry air, because it didn't have additional nudging from not only a subtropical ridge, any kind of additional instability focused on the storm. We're kind of in a very small corridor for this system to take full advantage of. And as you can see already, even if it were to stay just as it is, this will be problematic for Mexico, for Texas, and especially Louisiana and the rest of the Gulf coastline. We won't be in the immediate harm's way of this system, but we will feel this as far east as Georgia and South Carolina. And Francine is coming soon, confirmed. Did we get an update from National Hurricane Center? Let's see. They'll usually have a little thing up the top here. Let's see. Let me go back to this. Let me go to the home page. I don't see anything. Did we update the public advisory? Where are you getting that information from? What's up? Francine is coming soon, confirmed. Are you just saying that based on what it's looking like, or are you saying that because National Hurricane Center has stuff out? Because normally they would have a purple update up here somewhere. 11 a.m. update? Okay. Because right now I do see here, disturbance expected to become a tropical storm later today, risk a life-threatening storm surge and hurricane force winds along Louisiana and upper Texas coast by midweek. So that's another thing too, guys. Before we go any further, the time frame is going to be Wednesday night and throughout the day on Thursday. That's the time frame we're looking at. So truthfully, Mike, friends, family out there, you only have limited time. That's the crap. That's the garbage scenario with these homegrown systems. Even if this were going to be a sloppy feature, we only have so long before it's on your doorstep. So if you have not started to make any kind of preventative flooding measures, if you haven't started to secure loose objects outside, find a secure place for your vehicles, anything outside, you're running out of time, because it's in the Gulf of Mexico. And as we've all learned, whenever there's something in the Caribbean, all bets are off. Whenever it gets into the Gulf of Mexico, it's all hands on deck. So even if this feature does not rapidly intensify, which it very well looks like it's going to, look at the visible satellite shot, looking very impressive. This is a very concerning situation. So you need to, as soon as we cut this live stream, if you have not started to make your preparations, or if there's any last minute items, I'm looking right into the camera to emphasize how serious I am right now. You need to get started. I would almost encourage, if you haven't done so already, you know the time frame. We're expecting a hurricane. Cut out of the live stream right now if you need to, and go ahead and start getting that prep work done. Plan a Walmart trip, plan a Walgreens trip for any medication, pet medication, water, preferably fresh water, spring water, or even, what's the word I'm looking for? The baby's drinking. I'm trying to think. I put it in my car as well. Oh, gosh. Distilled water for any kind of appliances or things that may need running water with them. So as you can see, looking at the actual true color to the naked eye, you can see we had one vorticity shot come in from the north, and then we had our actual mid-level circulation come in from the south. Not too sure what happened with our GO-16 satellite overnight. You can see all that funkiness that just suddenly came across the loop here. This is a very healthy storm. It's a very healthy storm, and I think after our conversation, I believe it was Friday or Saturday, this system is really and quickly attempting to gain all of our respect. And it's got mine. It has my respect, and it has my attention full on and so forth. And as you can see, with all that blow-off that's already occurring on the north side, we are going to feel effects from this system in the Panhandle and in West Florida and in Central Florida, because we have that moisture stream being pulled in across the rest of the southeast and the Gulf coastline. So you'll likely see some thunderstorm and shower activity during the hottest portions of the day. If you live on the Texas coast, the Louisiana coast, Mike, in your neck of the woods, while you're at work today, you're probably going to see some pop-off thunderstorms, and then down through the rest of the southeast, Alabama, Georgia, and the Florida Peninsula. I'm probably going to be driving in thunderstorms again tonight, debating on if I should take the race car for the AC or take the Eclipse and just sweat it out. I can't make that call, Cassie D. I cannot. I am technically an official source, but I cannot make that call in terms of evacuations. That will come from your emergency management services, your EMS. It'll come from your local authorities, and it will come from your state legislature. They will let you know whether or not voluntary or mandatory evacuations will go in play, and I'm not too sure of the criteria that would warrant any type of evacuations. So unfortunately, I know that that's probably not the answer you're looking at, but I also don't want to step on anyone's toes and tell you information that could be either misleading or inaccurate, especially if this suddenly just falls apart. We've seen that so many times this hurricane season. We could be looking at a very healthy system, and then next thing you know, the dry air gets into it like Ernesto, and it's nothing. Doesn't seem to be the chance here. Does not look to be the likelihood here. We already have a solid ball of convection and even dense overcast cirrus. You can see as that sun comes up, I'll pause the loop. Let me get my cursor back before I miss it. Right there. I'll stop the loop. So these are your low to mid-level. These are your mid-level, I should say, outflow channel. Wow. Okay. Let me shrink that down again. We have outflow on the north side. Outflow beginning to make its way out on the south side with a little bit of banding on the inside already beginning to go on. All this ball-ish, hazy, white, grayish color is your dense cirrus overcast, or your cirrus dense overcast, however you want to call it, CDO. And what that tells us as forecasters, we have very strong convection firing near this system's center of circulation. I do still believe it is displaced ever so slightly off to the west, so it is not a perfectly vertically stacked system just yet. We're still getting there, but these are signals that we are going to start to develop. There's been folks asking me on X, on Instagram, how fast is this going to intensify? Well, unfortunately, the fact that we had convection sustaining itself overnight in very gracious amounts of convection, I'll switch very quickly. I'll keep the shot paused, but I'll switch over to the infrared. Look at that. I'll go to the end of the loop and pause it. Come on, where's my mouse? There we go. Look at that. This here is a sign of very, very good hot towers, strong and very high cumulonimbus clouds, all consolidated and tucked together around where that circulation is. Like I said, it does still seem like it's somewhat displaced to the west, but all in all, it's not a bad-looking storm. This would be our low-level vortex, if I'm not mistaken, right in through there. And what these thunderstorms are going to do is only further... Yep, Courtney, right there. Right there, you just hit it on the money. This is going to help to expedite and increase the rate with which we see that latent heat exchange. And in layman's terms, in summary, latent heat is basically we have the natural water cycle taking place. You have your evaporative processes down in the low levels. They rise up, they condense. That's what releases heat as it condenses. And then it obviously comes out and we get that release of latent heat into the atmosphere. And it's just an ever-evolving cycle. And when these tropical cyclones get that very intense thunderstorm to happen in that big ball that we see on satellite right now, that's what helps to speed that process up. Like an internal combustion engine, you turn your car on and you just sit it at idle, boom, 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 boom. But then when you mash the gas pedal, and that's more or less what's happening here. Pardon the silly sounds, but you know. Here's a look at windy.com. I'm going to take you through the stack of the environment. This is down at the surface, so you can see we're still fairly broad. We're not rapidly strengthening this feature yet, so we do still have that going for us. The next 12 to 18 hours are going to be pivotal in terms of what happens as it's on approach towards the Texas and Louisiana coastlines. I know we have this little dot right here, but what I'm looking at are our strongest winds, and you can see here we're still fairly broad. We have that shrimp structure already. There's the little tail that we would pull up. Willows here. There's the tail that we'd pull off whenever we're having some shrimp for dinner, but then there's the head and the body and all that, so we're getting that shrimp-like structure. There's your speed shear associated that came in yesterday. As well as you can see the terrain features here helping to amplify the winds coming off the coastline. Hi, Willow. Now, Willow's here to say hello to everybody. She hasn't been on a live stream in a while. We haven't really done a live stream on the channel this early in the morning, let alone for a system like this. So, you know, naturally she's in here like, oh, I got to get in on this. What's going on? This is kind of what I'd mentioned with the terrain helping this feature. So if you notice, we have a bit of an acceleration in the winds. We have our greens, our lighter greens, and then a bit of blue down over southern Texas and especially along the immediate coastline of Mexico here. But notice right along this boundary, it drops off. You see how there's really no discernible wind on the left side or the windward side here? That's because we have a mountainous ridge right in through there. And what's happening is our northerly flow that's coming down into the storm is accelerating. It's going through that channel. It's going from this to this. And as we all know, when you take something like a fire hose and you put your thumb over the edge of it, basic physics, it speeds up the amount of volume of mass or liquid going through there. Same concept here with the winds. You have a large wind field to the north here. See that? How our winds kind of accelerate before meeting the coastline of Texas due to friction, just going from a flat surface of the ocean to a landmass that is an increase in sea level or overall above ground level. But then notice how our northerly flow through San Antonio, Dilley, Laredo, etc., butts right up against this front range here and speeds up as it gets into the southern side of the system. And look at how these winds are just ripping out of the west. That's all inflow and helping this feature to further consolidate, which is also likely what's helping to increase the amount of thunderstorm activity that we see with it. If you come up to the mid-levels, if you go to 850, there it is. You're definitely getting that mid-level circulation parked right underneath our most divergent and diffluent quadrants of the large-scale weather features that are influencing its strength. And I'll zoom out and show you in the upper levels why it is that this is only going to get an extra nudge from our synoptic scale features over North America. So if you look, we have a trough down in through here, a very strong trough that's exiting the east coast of the United States, and another one that's getting ready to come down, a little bit of a short wave that's over Nebraska, Kansas, Oklahoma, that's going to reinforce the amount of diffluent flow we have over Mississippi, Alabama, Louisiana. I'll show you a chart. This is also why I do think that Louisiana is going to be our best spot, whoops, I just realized Willow bumped this. Our best spot for a potential landfall. Because if you look, we have a nice anticyclone here. This is the anticyclone that's helping to strengthen this feature as well. It's sitting right there at 500 millibars. And then we have an extra area of cyclonic curvature down in through here. So that path of least resistance, that infamous phrase, is going to be right up in through there. Right in between these two features. Now, what we'll have to see is whether or not this ridge broadens out a little bit more or does continue to increase in amplitude, because that will allow for a bit more of an eastward nudge, a bit more of that curvature around, as opposed to just pile driving straight up into north and central Louisiana. I hope that makes sense to you guys. Here's a look at our upper level winds brought to us by the 6Z European model. I'm looking at this particular area right here. So you notice this red blip? That's what's called a jet max. That's what's called a jet max there. And the reason that I point this out is that is likely to increase the strength of this anticyclone, which unfortunately is a problem. That's a problem. It's going to help to increase the ventilation of this system. Proper air and energy to get into our circulation, which is why it looks so healthy on satellite imagery. If I go just a bit further into the loop, well, this is valid time for 6Z Monday morning. If I go to 0Z tomorrow, notice how our winds are starting to increase. Look at how our system is perfectly perched in the most divergent quadrant. Now remember, divergent is in the vertical, diffluent is horizontal. So I say divergent in this anticyclone because if you notice, our streamlines, they start here, they start here, they start there, they start there. So we are parked right underneath where this system needs to be to kind of like a snorkel when you're underwater, to breathe up and get that air out and then pull air back in. It's got a perfect exhaust mechanism, and the jet to the north is going to allow that anticyclone to stay strong. Notice how, again, we got another jet max here. You see that? Jet max intensifying our feature here. That's why our models, if I go forward in time and I just go to landfall, look at how fast our European model wants to rapidly intensify this system. Now, again, I use rapid intensification in its proper form, okay? I'm not saying rapidly intensify into another Beryl or a Harvey. That's not what I'm saying. Rapid intensification encompasses all storm systems, and rapid intensification is only a specific millibar drop over a period of 12 to 24 hours. Doesn't mean rapid intensification from a tropical storm to a Category 5. That's not That's not rapid intensification. Folks will use that terminology incorrectly, just like our favorite H-active word that has been thrown around all hurricane season. When I say rapidly intensify, we take a very disorganized system and very quickly put it together. That's it. If it had more time over water, that would be problematic. If it were coming in from the Caribbean and rapidly intensifying and then moving into the actual Gulf of Mexico, this would be another Idalia easily, or another Charlie, or another Ian. So thankfully, we are starting out with only this much of ground, or I should say water, to cover as it moves to the north. Then finally, if you notice, our trough upstream of this ridge begins to dig down, and this is when we'll have to determine if it only occurs after the feature has made landfall or if it occurs before the feature makes landfall. Because if, and I'll zoom out here so we can see to the United States, you see this big old trough coming down? That's going to help to increase our shear. That's going to help to increase our shear down the road. So we're playing once again that game of time. In the first glance here, we're in that proper corridor. See this? We have a little subtropical trough right there, and then we have our ridge building, so we're in that diffluent and divergent quadrant. This is going to help the system. Then as that next trough axis works its way across the Rockies right in through here, that's when it'll be a determination of, well, will the shear increase enough to stop it from intensifying further, or will it miss that introduction of additional shear? See that? Miss that introduction of additional shear. Right now, we're inside the anticyclone. You go a little forward in time, and boom, we're starting to see our wind shear between 850 and 200, our deep layer wind shear, increase to the west of this system. So we'll have to see. We'll have to see. We're still playing a big game of timing. Right now, the system itself is optimizing this game of timing, but we'll have to wait and see as we go over the rest of the day tomorrow and into Wednesday as we're getting close to game time on the Louisiana coast. If I switch down to the surface and go to our mean sea level pressure anomaly, it looks like the Euro has jogged a bit back towards the west as well. Still a fairly organized Category 1 hurricane here, but the European model in comparison to yesterday, for example, at 12 Zulu, notice we were a little bit further to the east, putting New Orleans, Baton Rouge a bit more under the gun, as well as Biloxi and interior Mississippi. At 18 Zulu, it nudged even further to the east, and now we're starting to retrograde a little bit further towards the west. So that's why if you look at the description to this video, I'd mentioned anywhere between Beaumont and Baton Rouge is where I do predict our landfall is going to occur. This is a big system, though. I'll switch back to our infrared. This is a big system. So regardless, if you're in Houston, Beaumont, Texas, along the Gulf Coast between those major cities, all the way to New Orleans and even Mississippi, you need to take this system seriously. And I'll go ahead and go back to our windy overlay so I can paint the picture for you. I'll take us through time using the Euro model on here. We'll fast forward to Wednesday. So see this, and actually if you look, the European model is thinking that we're going to get a little bit of wind shear to bring itself in and start to erode the mid to upper level cyclone of this feature. If I go down to the surface though, let's go down to, we'll go to 100 feet above sea level, or 100 meters above ground level. This is what has me concerned. Okay, Chandler K, at the lowest level of the atmosphere, it's getting there. We still have a very broad donut-shaped center. In the mid-levels, our mid-level circulation is definitely consolidating thanks to this convection. The thunderstorms that are around it right now are really helping to cram it together like a big ball of Play-Doh that you used to have when you were a kid. It's helping to cram it and condense it together. This is now going to be valid for the lunch hour on Wednesday, and why I'm concerned about the angle of attack, the angle of incidence with this system, is if you kind of imagine, and I'll leave us right here. Roxanne Hudson, thank you very much for the $5 donation. How much more east will it move? Well, not too much east. Again, I'm thinking Baton Rouge to Beaumont is where this system is going to come ashore. I really do not see it going to New Orleans, but what I really want us to pay attention to, not only through the rest of the day today until Jonathan and I see you guys tonight at around 8, 9 o'clock to talk tropics, I want us to pay attention to the progression and the intensity of our overall ridge that is shielding Florida from this feature, and Georgia and the Carolinas. But let me go back to the illustration here. If you imagine this, I'll draw a very rough pressure gradient around this feature. So obviously, as we all know, since this is a ball of low pressure, this is going to be our isobaric pattern, our pressure gradient force, going down to our low pressure at the center there, and then we have, obviously, we're just increasing pressure as we go around. If this system were to track right in like this, according to National Hurricane Center, according to our latest European model, where my concern begins is looking at the orientation of a lot of our little deltas, jetties, inlets for the boot of Louisiana, to include Lake Pontchartrain and the Pontchartrain Bridge. Look at the wind flow already, and this is still well offshore. It's funneling right on into that geographic area, and as Mike has told me, they are below sea level, so any little increase in water and a little pushing or a little nudge from our winds are going to, it's going to help to bring even a couple inches of water in. Is going to probably cause problems. We saw with Alberto. Alberto gave us a lot of coastal flooding for Louisiana, and that system was very broad and very weak. So if you look, right now, Houston and Beaumont and the rest of Texas are going to be on the good side of this feature. We're not only on the weak side of it, but we're also on the offshore flow. So flooding will only be likely induced by our precip as opposed to anything on the coast. We're still obviously going to have rough seas, but you could very well potentially see sea level go down as this system comes across. New Orleans, Biloxi, even a little bit of Mobile and the barrier islands there, and especially at the boot of Louisiana, are really going to need to take this serious, starting early Wednesday and throughout the day Wednesday and into Thursday. If I go just a little further in time, we'll go to Thursday right about landfall. Now look at how much of our increase, and this is down at 100 meters. I'll go all the way down to the surface so we can see our wind flow, and I'll take you in real close. Let me see, can I switch to the winds here? Let's see, I want to put the winds on and actually show the wind data. Let me see. How can I turn the wind data on? I don't want the rainfall and I don't want temperature. I want actual winds. Can anyone in the chat potentially help me with turning our winds on? I don't use windy to this extent too often. So I want to look at our actual wind gusts down at the surface here. But anyways, these are your gusts right here. And I'm looking at this area particularly, Slidell, Hammond, New Orleans, Port Sulphur, Huma, Morgan City. Even the intracoastal city here is going to be right in that notch if this were to verify as our landfall site. This is probably going to be an issue. New Orleans will not be fine. We're going to have all this water funneling right on into the big bodies of water here. So New Orleans could definitely see some flooding on this, as well as our overall blob of convection. If we were to look at a simulated reflectivity and a simulated infrared satellite shot, we're probably going to have a lot of rainfall helping to up our total accumulations here. Now that I'm pretty sure I can pull up here. If not, let's go over here and we'll switch over to our satellite image on the GFS. There we go, simulated IR. Let's go forward in time. Yeah, see, look at all that convection that's right over top the system. So this could be a very problematic scenario. Very problematic scenario. And I know we've gone completely off the rails, to tell you the truth. I've gotten off the rails. This is not what I wanted to brief, but I wanted to take you guys in as close as possible. These are the actual European ensembles brought to us by 6 Zulu. And you can see we're pretty much right in line with Baton Rouge to Beaumont. We need to get this a little bit more converged. We need to tighten this up a little bit more. To see winds, click on anywhere in the map, and it'll show you that for that site. Ernesto, thank you very much. Let me go back to windy and take a look. Let's switch to our winds once again. Let's see. There we go. So we have 42 knots out of the southeast here. We have 21 knots out of the east here. We have, let's see, for the intracoastal city, 34 knots, which equates to tropical storm winds, tropical storm level winds being funneled right on into this area. So flooding will be the main issue. Now, we also have to take into the equation how strong this feature gets. Our ceiling, I do believe, Category 2. I have all of our hurricane models pulled up so we can take a look at this together. This is brought to us by WeatherBell. You can see our hurricane models after receiving that reconnaissance data from yesterday. Really, let me change this. This is kilometers per hour. I don't need you guys thinking that this is a freaking Category 4 hurricane. We're not going to see 190 miles. So if we switch over to our knots, you can see that our HAFS A model on landfall a little bit further towards the east. This is right about just around that intracoastal area, putting New Orleans more or less in that immediate right front quadrant. You can see that the HAFS-A model is forecasting between 40 to 50 knots of wind, maybe even a little stronger depending on how the terrain interacts with the wind coming in off the water. That's going to play a role as well. The immediate moment you leave the shoreline, you're going to see the winds go down. That is a major metropolitan area, so obviously the terrain as well as the infrastructure, the urban layout, the big cities, the tall buildings, the smaller buildings are going to create a bit of a block for the onshore winds. Right along the immediate coast is where you typically realize the full extent of your onshore winds, and then they taper off pretty quickly from there. But you can see this is not an optimal side to be on if you want to avoid storm surge and coastal flooding. And I would not be surprised if National Hurricane Center pushes the storm surge values up on the right side of this feature. The intercoastal area is definitely going to have to watch, as well as these barrier islands. The barrier islands are going to be under the gun for intense hurricane force conditions. You go just beyond that, and we still have not let this gradient up. That's another thing as well, Mike. I'm looking at this very closely, and I'm going to be looking at, I even told Jonathan, anytime we're not training today, anytime that we're not working on projects, I'm going to be investigating this heavily, because even after landfall, I'll go forward even more in time, even after landfall, our surge and our flood risk is not going to decrease. If you think about the pressure gradient again around the system, we're still going to see winds being pulled into the Lake Pontchartrain area. Even as the system moves onshore, our onshore flow is not going to change because of the cyclonic orientation of this feature. It's not. We're also going to start to see this bleed over into the panhandle of Florida, Alabama, and Mississippi. The coastline there is going to have to watch this very closely. I'll take you through the HAFS-B very quickly before I start to take questions and we get back on track. HAFS-B coming in a bit further towards the west, still putting us on track for a central Louisiana somewhere landfall. I don't see this being a Texas threat. I don't see this being a Mississippi, Alabama, or Florida threat. Louisiana is going to be in the direct line of fire here. If I go forward using our H-WRF model, this is the wrong system. Let me see. Where is H-WRF? Here we go. 6. There we go. H-WRF actually coming in a little bit further to the west of the HAFS-B as well, right around that same level of intensity. And the reason I'm taking this serious now is because our hurricane models immediately jumped up the moment they got that new data. And you can see that 0Z was when we got our new hurricane reconnaissance data in, and that's when all of our models immediately went from sloppy tropical storm, low-end hurricane to maybe a Category 2. If I switch over to the mean sea level pressure, you can see 983, 986, 984. If I switch over to the mean sea level pressure on the HAFS-B, right around that same area, 970-ish, right off the coast. Actually, good lord, the HAFS-B goes for a Cat 3. Let me go back to 0Z. Okay, there we go. That's a little bit more representative. Category 2 on approach. HAFS-B always seems to get just a little more zealous with our intensity. So I'm still holding our threshold at Cat 2 for now. Let me go back in time and take a look at our HAFS-A model, mean sea level pressure, see how this is ebbing and jiving. HAFS-A at 6Z, going a little more bullish at 0Z, keeping it bullish. Okay. So yeah, we're going to have to see exactly what happens over the next 12 to 18 hours. When we talk tonight on Tropics Watch, Jonathan and I with you guys, we're going to explore exactly what goes on with this feature and see exactly what it looks like on satellite image as we get closer to the... But regardless, this is a significant scenario for our friends out there in Louisiana, and it should be taken serious. So we should take this very serious. The HAFS models, particularly the A and the H, all of our, honestly, hurricane models have done fairly well with this hurricane season. They verified tremendously with Beryl. They verified really well with Debbie. They verified well with Ernesto, even capturing the internal mechanisms of the cyclone after or before, during, and after ingesting the dry air and a bit of that cool continental air off of the CONUS. So I would definitely take this seriously. Even if we do only realize a Category 1, Category 2, it's not something to play around with. Not something to play around with. Cody Lambeth, I'm starting to see the threat to Texas diminishing. We should be able to keep you on the weaker side of the system. I don't foresee this suddenly coming in and moving much further towards the west. This is definitely going to be a Louisiana issue. If I take you through the 0Z European ensembles, you can see that trough, that shortwave coming in across the desert southwest and Texas is what's going to help to bump it towards the north and kind of broaden out the ridge that's protecting Florida, just like we saw with Beryl, protecting Florida and the rest of the southeast. But the kicker here is, how much is this ridge going to deteriorate? Because if the northern apex of this subtropical ridge here does break down over the southeast, northern Florida, Georgia, and South Carolina, excuse me, guys, that could allow this system to boop and kind of slip a little further to the east at the last second. We've seen a number of storms do that. That last second little jog towards the right. Debbie this hurricane season did it. So I'm going to be watching run to run, and I haven't been over the last few days. I apologize for that. I haven't been doing it the last few days because I've been very focused on what's going on with the military and the new job, etc., but I'm going to start watching run to run very closely, because if you notice, the Euro even here at 0Z, the European ensemble, does take it right up along the west or the east coast of Mexico, skirting the coastline of Texas. That shortwave comes in, broadens out our ridge a little bit, and it becomes a little bit more east side loaded or easterly trajectoried as it moves up into the Gulf coastline. So for Houston, Beaumont, you still want to take this serious. You're going to have the offshore flow, thankfully, so that will help to prevent a little bit of that coastal flooding, that coastal storm surge, inundation. However, heavy rain is still going to be a problem. Your stronger convective bands are still going to be a problem. But we should be able to keep you on the weaker side of the system. We should really be able to keep you on the weaker side of this system. It's going to be our friends in Baton Rouge, New Orleans, Biloxi, who I do think that are going to be on the worst side, the right front quadrant, the dirty side of this system. The GFS is more or less thinking the same thing. If you notice, we have our anticyclone right here spinning around over South Florida, helping to kind of agitate our thunderstorm coverage here for the Sunshine State and parts of Georgia, the Panhandle, and that's what's going to allow this system to spill towards the east. It's going to be flowing on the west side of this feature. So wherever the northernmost point, the apex of that ridge is, if it broadens out, if it comes up from this and becomes more of a lower lying hill, right now we have a bit more of an amplified peak. If I switch back over to our anomaly and rewind it, see how the red extends into the mid-Atlantic over the Florida Peninsula and into Georgia, but then as the system's on approach, we lose the red and we get a little bit more of a bluish lowering height coupling there. That's what's going to allow it to go from north to east. And it's going to ride that anticyclonic circulation around the northern apex of that ridge. You can see it in the winds here. We have predominantly northerly flow thanks to a frontal system in our stationary boundary. Then as that shortwave and additional vorticity comes in from the west, that's just going to break this down and increase our gradient on the right side of this system and allow it to possibly plop over to the right-hand side. So we'll have to wait and see. We'll have to give it another 12 hours to get a better feel for the steering, and then hopefully our European and our GFS ensembles will start to consolidate a little bit better. If I switch us over to our GFS ensembles, we're pretty much in line. The mean here, the average, is going to be right in through there. So we'll have to see. That's why I'm getting ready to take Houston especially off the board. You should remain on the weak side of this system. Still definitely worth taking seriously, but I do think Louisiana is going to be the main area of concern for this feature, for sure. For sure. But what questions do I have? I know that we went a little long explaining a lot of the terminology and the jargon. Let's see if we have an update just yet. Let's sit on National Hurricane Center to see what our 11 o'clock advisory looks like while I take questions. Please, anyone, fire questions. You do not need to donate or do anything like that. And I fully agree. That's crazy that Reed Timmer and I are on the same page. That's awesome. Category 2. I still think Cat 2 is going to be my ceiling, to tell you the truth. We want to see how that upstream trough and our ridge behave as that interaction gets closer together. Right now we have the Bay of Campeche, the terrain feature on the left-hand side, helping to increase the intensity of the convection and all that whatnot. The part that I want us to watch closely, and I know that it sucks, that the part that we want to play or pay close attention to is going to be as it's nearing the shoreline. Cody Lambeth, I have the schedule this week to do so. So yeah, if anything, if it does seem like we have any adjustments or big changes and we don't hit everything on the head tonight at 8 or 9 o'clock at the studio, we will go ahead and we'll go live again tomorrow morning. Naz, does it have wind shear still? No, Brady G. This is right on in the anticyclone. It is shrouded away from the wind shear. Family lives near Atlanta. Oh, yeah, absolutely. Atlanta, Georgia is only going to feel some showers and storms off of this system just by increasing the moisture in that general area. Florida area ridge, we're going to have to wait and give it a little bit more time. What will the extent of the hurricane force winds be? Courtney, that's going to be very heavily determined by how much this feature consolidates. I'll take you back over to the true color visible satellite shot so we can take a look at it with our own eyes. And so as this goes through time and we get to the very tail end, dang, I mean, honestly, this is a very healthy looking system. I'm very impressed. I'm very impressed with how quick this came together. Very impressed. I mean, if I were to draw the little hurricane symbol, you already got it. Already got it. But anyways, Courtney, to answer your question, right now we still have a very broad, low-level circulation, and our convection is all pretty much off to the west and the south side of the system. Our center is going to be somewhere in through here, and that's why our winds, if I go back to that interactive chart on National Hurricane Center, are all on the west side. So we need to see how much the symmetry of this system improves. I know it looks healthy on the satellite, but we also still have a bit of lopsidedness to it. We're not perfectly aligned with our low, mid, and upper level circulations and the anticyclone aloft, but we are getting there. But this thing definitely took full advantage of the overnight diurnal maximum, and it is looking very good. Again, easily one of the healthier storms that we've seen all hurricane season. I know that doesn't say very much because this would be numero 6, but regardless, in comparison to Alberto, Chris, Debbie, and Ernesto, Beryl was the only one that could be a toe-to-toe contender with organizing at the rate with which this one is doing so. And you can see, you can't even really see your overshooting tops. I mean, they're there. There's some popcorn-looking overshooting tops in the core complex of our convection, but the CDO, that cirrus dense overcast, is already coming together so well. There's another little overshooting top right there, a nice little pop burst of thunderstorms to the south side of the low. That's also another indication that we are right underneath where this system needs to be to just essentially spit up towards the upper atmosphere and get all that excess unfavorable air, if you will, for it to breathe and really, exhaust that latent heat exchange properly. TRG, thank you very much for tuning in, bud. I didn't ignore you. I did not want to, not pay attention to you. I just wanted to get through all the information, but thanks for tuning in this morning. I'm waiting to see if our 11 o'clock bulletin comes out and they upgrade it, because this, low-key, if it were me, even if we don't have the specific criteria, I'd just go ahead and upgrade it. We already have 50-mile-an-hour winds found in the system. This is why I don't like PTC. Like, I get we're waiting for the tightly wrapped ball of vorticity and the internal thermodynamics to come together and optimize, and that vertical stack, all that fun sciencey jargon. I would still go ahead and just classify it. And if they don't want to go full-on named storm, I would just go tropical depression, because it's going to intensify regardless. We are in a very healthy state. Even as we reach the end of our diurnal maximum, we get that daytime heating to start up in the distribution of the instability and our rising motions around the system. What other questions do we have? Let's go ahead and kill just a few more minutes before I have to go and make breakfast and get ready for the day. Going to be in the studio late tonight, so we're going to be looking at all this information. Nomad Avenue 6, I would personally agree. I would just go ahead and classify it. I definitely would just classify it personally. And we'll see. Maybe National Hurricane Center is on the same page. They're looking at it this morning. They had their overnight shift looking at it. Hopefully they've established some decent continuity, and we'll see what happens. I would go ahead and just classify it, though. I wouldn't wait. Still at the 7 o'clock advisory. Is it on the METOC? Is it on the Navy page? Classified as tropical storm? What's up? Because we're still looking at I'm sure there's a lot of people on the website right now refreshing it, so it's probably not going to update immediately. Let me see if I go to the printer-friendly version. Sometimes the printer-friendly version of this page will update before nope, still not updated yet. Isaac Logan, I would not timestamp a storm for Florida, but I do think we could see something crawling out of the Western Caribbean as we go through the late periods of September and especially into October. I think if we were going to see something for Florida, my hunch, my gut instinct, just like I had called for August, I still honestly cannot believe that my August forecast verified from back in April, May, June. Still can't believe that. But if my gut instinct that I went off of for my August prediction, I would say early October is when I think Florida could have something creeping up on us. There it is. So they did. They called it. Excellent. I'm so glad that they called it. Let's take a look at the new track. Let's see, did they update the printer-friendly version yet? Nope. So the new track has not come out yet. Forecast advisory. 75 knots, 75 knots. So they're still going with, what is that, a Cat 1? That's still 85, 90 mile an hour hurricane. Is this the latest track advisory? 1,002 millibars, 45 knots. So it is deepening. It is deepening. I really want the track to update so we can take a look at it, though. So there it is. There you have it, folks. At 10:56 a.m., we have Tropical Storm Francine. I know Dr. Phil Klotzbach is probably tweeting it out right now. Tropical Storm Francine has formed in the Gulf of Mexico, the Bay of Campeche. I'm hoping that once we get an update in our graphics here, they really need to populate this quicker. I know they're probably sending Longline right now. This is still PTC, isn't it? Or did they update it? Let's see. Is this the new? Oh, no, this is still 7 a.m. So I'm just going to close this out and wait for our track and all that to come together here. Let's see. Still have the 7 a.m. track. There's your flood potential. I'm just going to go ahead and bring this up now while we wait for the track update. You can see that Houston, East Texas, where we stand right now, this is why I'm glad we're going to be on the weak side of it. We're still going to have some issues, obviously, and we're going to have to watch for the flaring up of thunderstorms thanks to that wind shear brought on by the jet. But Louisiana, Mississippi, I feel, is going to see the brunt of this system, period, regardless of how you slice it. Where's our storm surge? There we go. So right now, I'm surprised, and this is probably because of where it's going to come on shore. Right now, the track has it a little bit further towards the west, so it makes sense to have our greatest storm surge down in through here. If we do see a nudge towards the east, don't be surprised if these, I mean, obviously it's going to. The red's going to be shifted this way, and the orange is going to be shifted this way. So a lot is really going to be determined as we approach the last 8 to 12 hours of this system coming in off the coastline. Going to have to see if it jogs to the right ever so slightly at all. Come on, track update so we can see it. Still hasn't updated on the printer-friendly version. I want to show you guys the new cone. This is still 7 a.m. Shucks, come on. Click here for the new. I don't want the experimental cone. I want the new. We're probably overloading National Hurricane Center's server right now. Everybody is probably blasting this out to social media. Let me just reload the page entirely, see if it comes up. There's Francine. So, no change in winds. Again, I'm glad that they changed it. I'm glad that they just upgraded it because 50 mile an hour winds, that's already almost approaching a mid-grade tropical storm. You probably have winds of 55, 65 miles an hour closest to the center in gust, and for gust potential. Nope, still has not. Where are you seeing the updated track? Where are we seeing the updated track? Wilma was, I believe, early to mid-October, Sharon. But yeah, guys, again, for those of you out there, and this is for anybody you may know on social media or other sources you may follow, if anyone is still calling this season a bust, you need to tell them to put it somewhere not so friendly, because the fact that we are now going to be 6 storms deep with another United States landfall says a lot. Even if you only look at our hurricane, actually, as a matter of fact, guys, gosh, look at that. That's already we've already beaten 2023. We had 20 named storms last year. Now, it's still not coming in. Anyways, I'm going to leave it here, and we'll go on a bit of a tirade for a second. For everybody calling this season a bust, I can't stand that. It irks me. It makes my eye twitch. 20 storms last year. 20 storms in an El Nino year. We had 3 landfalls. We had Idalia, the one hurricane. That was it. Remember, guys, one hurricane. We had Tropical Storm Harold, slop. We had Tropical Storm Ophelia, slop. We only had 1 hurricane landfall last year. This year, we've already had Beryl. We've had Debbie. We had Ernesto make landfall in Bermuda and up in Atlantic Canada and through the Caribbean. And now we're going to have Francine. So we've already had 4 hurricanes impact people. We only had 1 last year, to put it into perspective. So this season, albeit we're not getting to everyone's favorite thing, we're not seeing the named storms. It's like, well, people are getting hit, and I feel like that is far more prevalent, a far more pressing statistic than how many storms we see spin out in the Atlantic. I'd rather focus and bring you guys the weather coverage and the information you need for pressing storms as opposed to hype up systems that are just spinning in the Atlantic. Oh, hey, yeah, Ace, wow, that's fantastic, great. But the fact that we have another hurricane coming into the same general area just verifies this hurricane season on so many different levels. So many different levels. Come on, forecast track. Dang, we're still not updating it. There we go. Okay. So, look at that. So they are thinking it's going to go hurricane a little bit sooner. They are thinking it's going to go hurricane a little bit sooner. 1 a.m. on Wednesdays. Check that out. I'm going to go to the printer-friendly version again. 1 a.m. Wednesday. So as we go into very early morning Wednesday was when National Hurricane Center was initially predicting hurricane status. If I switch to the printer-friendly version, we now have a hurricane at 7 p.m. on Tuesday. So they've bumped that up a little bit. Obviously, there's some time in between the little plots, so maybe it is still on track for the same time. But as far as what I can see, we've also nudged ourselves to hurricane intensity a little bit faster than previously. Let's see if the experimental or the interactive cone has updated just yet. It does not look like it. This is still... Yeah, no, this is still 11 o'clock. Or not 11 o'clock, excuse me, 7 o'clock. So we're not going to be able to look up close and personal at what they're thinking. So that's that. That's that. We're... Technically speaking, yes. Technically speaking, it should find a way to start rounding the ridge. So if you look, and we'll finish up the live stream on our satellite shot here, and I'll kind of walk you through steering. Here's our anticyclone. You can see the northernmost apex of the anticyclone is to the north here, indicated by very weak transverse banding in the clouds, that little short wave that's popping off the coast of the southeast. So that's going to help to drive this system north, like so. Early on, for the next 12 to 24 hours, it should consistently stay moving north, if not north-northwest. As our jet energy creeps in from the Great Plains and our little vortmax here, you can see over Arizona right now, moves in out of the west, that's going to help to break this down some, and we're going to see this decrease. A stronger system will find that decrease in amplitude and strength a little bit faster. So we'll have to see if it comes up and moves in, or I'll switch the color. We'll see if it moves up and keeps curving around. And obviously, I'm not expecting it to do that. That's just me not letting go of the... Let me draw that again. I'm sorry. Or curve up and around and do that. Because that'll also pay dividends right in that area. Any subtle little adjustment in the track, that close to proximity, will mean the world for our viewers right along the coast of Texas and especially Louisiana and Mississippi. We still have really good convection blowing up there as well. We still have very good convection. Let's switch over to the visible satellite. Let the sun come up. We'll get a little bit of that sun angle too. Yeah, we still have really good convection blossoming with that system. I'm so thankful that they brought the system to a tropical storm status. Just name it. Yesterday, PTC, because everything was, still messing around, but now this is definitely tropical, full-fledged tropical. So I apologize yesterday for those of you, or not yesterday, on Saturday for those of you who watched, and I was forecasting a tropical storm. At first, given the dynamics in the frontal system, it definitely looked to be just another sloppy system, but with as fast as this system consolidated, this will definitely take full advantage of the atmospheric environment and the water below it, and help it to kind of kickstart that engine a little bit faster. Now, one little bit of good news, I've noticed that it's been tossed around a little bit. Our shelf waters have gone down just a little bit. Because of the front and the continuous stream of cloud cover and moisture, notice that our anomalies are just a little bit cooler the further north you go. Right now, it makes sense it's blowing up such gratuitous convection because we are in the hottest part of the Gulf of Mexico. But as we go to the north, our water temps will actually go down ever so slightly on approach. So, I mean, we kind of have that going for us just a little bit. I mean, granted, it's not much. It's going to pass through the hottest waters, and then we're still sitting in 30, 29 degree Charlie temperatures, but the shelf waters have cooled off a little bit. So, Mike, I'm not sure to tell you the truth, but I don't know if I'm going to be going out there. But anyways, guys, we're going to go ahead and cut the live stream. I got to have breakfast. I have about an hour and a half before I got to get started on the day and get moving. And, we'll see you again tonight. We'll definitely see you again tonight. We'll see you 8 or 9 o'clock. I'll talk to Jonathan as soon as we get into the studio today, and we'll ballpark when it is we're going to go live. We might push for 8 p.m., but I know last time we went live at 9 because we were preparing, but regardless, I'll keep you guys updated on Instagram and other social media platforms, and we'll see you again soon. If you have any questions, comments, or concerns, leave them in the comments section down below. Upon the conclusion of this live stream, please consider clicking that subscribe button and nudging that like button. Let's get those likes up. Our likes have been fairly low for some strange reason. Let's get the likes up and start getting the algorithm to vibe with this channel a little bit more, get that information out there, and then do the same please tonight for the Just Weather channel. It's called Just Weather, where we'll be doing our Tropics Watch tonight. Jonathan and I from News 6 Live will be talking tropics and getting you guys up to speed on as much as possible with that storm out there in the Gulf with now newly named Francine. And yeah, so you guys are going to get a 2-for-1 deal. You see me this morning, and then you'll see the two of us putting our heads together with the information tonight. So I'm definitely excited for that, and we'll talk to you again very soon. Forgive me for the abrupt outro, but I definitely want to go get some food and pack myself for the day. So we'll see you guys again soon. Thank you very much for watching. You've been a wonderful audience, and until next time, this is Weather Center Nazario signing out.